Wow, you mean there's a new technology that could really impact humanity and we're doing nothing with it? I need those people to hear this story.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Particle Accelerator podcast, where we talk to future thinking business leaders about how to grow and accelerate business. I'm here with Ross. Ross, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your podcast. My background is a little bit mixed: environmental science, industrial engineering, worked in the medical imaging business, worked in the video and optical disc business, plastics business, bioplastics, and drug discovery. I'm an inventor. So I have about 75 patents that have been issued worldwide and have even battled against an $8 billion company to win what I would call it was, settled on the courtroom steps, but a win against a company abusing our patents. So got a history there as far as engineering wise. I think our success as businesses kind of illustrate that. Business wise, I've hit the Inc. 500 for 5 years in a row at one point in my history. And then I got named Entrepreneur of the Year for Manufacturing in Ohio, then named the SBA Business Person of the Year for the whole nation. So I've had a number of different awards there. And then we've also had experience in winning some pretty sizable grants based on technology I invented. ARPA-E, which is the Department of Energy, DARPA, US Air Force, NIH. We've won about 9 million in awards for creating technologies and moving them forward. So that's about me.
Oh, awesome, man. This is going to be an exciting podcast with such an amazing background and so innovative and creative. I like to go back and get to know you a bit. And so I go back to, what was your first job? For me, it was, I had a paper route when I was younger. I had a route. I was fortunate enough to live on my route. What was your first job?
Well, I didn't do the paper route, but I did yard mowing and yard cleanup. But I really count my first job as being a waiter. And I think there's some things to be taught that are really lifelong lessons from being wait staff. And that is, it's instant gratification. When you do a good job, typically people will reward you for doing that good job, either their words or their actual dollars. And it's not an easy job.
Yeah.
It can actually be a grueling job. You could be on your feet for hours and hours. And in my case, I was in the sun because I was a curb hop at a point in time where they still would take orders at a car and run food to a car. So this was a while ago. But I think that first job really gave you exposure to different people in the workforce, different work habits, and you learn really quickly everything you get paid depended upon you.
Yeah. Love it. So what toy or hobby did you have as a child that inspired what you do career wise today?
I would say none. I raced sailboats. It was somewhat competitive. Well, okay, it was a lot competitive. Also did photography. So I think my hobbies were really hobbies, but I think every time you explore something that's new or different, it expands you pretty dramatically. So I would say that's on the surface, probably the hobbies I remember the most, but there were many other things that I did. I wanted to explore you know, the world in any way possible.
Yeah. Yeah. That's cool. Yeah. I mean, programming and computer software stuff for me started really young at a Commodore 64, and just, you know, uh, kind of tapped in early. What was your favorite?
I did that as well, just to let you know. That was
Cool.
something that I had one of the very first programmable calculators from Casio, and it was only about that big,
Yeah.
6 inches by 5 inches, but it had, I think, 265 bytes. And that's all the programming you could put into it. I was doing that early, and then I did it with my first engineering job. So that was one of the things that sticks with me today too, programming.
Cool. What was your favorite and least favorite course in college?
Ichthyology too. It was just a drag. You had to memorize 264 coastal fishes of Florida and Georgia by sight down to the genus and species. It was just a ridiculous memorization task where today you probably can pull out your camera, do a Google search on image, take a picture, and there you get everything you need to have.
Right.
So, I think it's funny. I put on one of my LinkedIn comments today too. So when you talk about how archaic things were, we're still dealing with things that are archaic today. And in the future, we'll look back and go, wow, I can't believe they were doing that. But in one of my chemistry classes, again, I kind of date myself. The rule was, even though there were scientific calculators available at the time, we had to do all of our calculations on a slide ruler, which just wasn't taking advantage of the tools that were available at its time. I think people are picky today about AI and about, well, did you write it or did AI write it? I'm sorry, it's a future tool. And if you don't get good at using it now, you're going to get behind.
Yeah, for sure. Cool. What quote from a famous person lives in your mind rent free?
Luck is 95% perspiration, 5% chance. And that was Ben Franklin.
That was great. That's a great one. Last of the lightning round questions. What was the greatest invention or discovery in the past 300 years?
Ooh, now if you'd gone a little bit further back, I would have said the printing press, but you didn't cover that time frame. That's a tough one, but if I had to say, it's the integrated circuit.
Integrated circuit. Any further explanation?
Well, there's hardly a device, a plane, an automobile. There is, the cloud wouldn't be the cloud without, I mean, I could look on my desk and the amount of integrated circuits that are driving this technology now. So the explanation would be, a transistor had 3 poles and it would gate electricity. Depending upon how the transistors were wired, you could move electricity under certain circumstances in different ways. Well, transistors were originally vacuum tubes. So a single transistor was a vacuum tube, and you could make a TV, you could send astronauts to the moon. But ultimately, the transistor, which is a type of integrated circuit, was invented that ultimately allowed them to photographically compress the transistors onto chips and to integrated circuits with immense complexity and the power to store data. So I think hands down, that is a pretty important one for today's world and for where we're going. You take that away, we probably would be in a whole different world right now.
Yeah, for sure. That makes me want to see who the inventor of the integrated circuit was. Inventor of the, who we got? Jack Kilby? No, maybe? Or is there some dispute?
Yeah, I know when you talk about the silicon chip and the ability to move into new technologies, Intel is got their name stamped all over the origins of that. How far back? Hewlett Packard. There's so many people, and mostly in the Silicon Valley, mostly driven by post-war and even war efforts to advance. So a lot of money came from the government to actually advance those technologies.
The monolithic integrated circuit was demonstrated in 1960. German physicist engineer Werner Jacobi, but it just seems like people kept latching. There's a lot of other people that improved upon it.
Yeah, and I would say the transistor, which predates that would be a good one to look up. And my guess is we had really good transistor radios in the 60s.
So moving on to the main round, what tech trend significantly impacted you or your industry, and how did your company respond? So this will get a little bit into what you're working on, and what tech trends significantly impacted your industry, and kind of transition from where you came from, being a waiter on being a curb hop. What kind of tech trend are you attached to now?
Well, the tech trend I'm attached to now is how do we get nature's and biology's hidden drug like molecules? We created a technology that got funded by a number of different alphabet agencies. But what people don't realize is humans today probably have access to a fraction of 1% of the molecules nature makes. Even in our own gut microbiome, which is a pretty big topic these days, where 15 years ago it was not a topic. Today, hundreds of thousands of scientific papers have been written just in the last several years. Where you go back to 2005, you might find 100 scientific papers written about the microbiome in the entire history. So it's a technology, it's an understanding we didn't have till genomics, but it's still a black box. So the microbes inside of us actually outnumber our human cells. That's pretty wild. And genomically, we've all heard about 23,000 genes, 23andMe. The microbiome that lives in us and outnumbers us actually has more than 25 million genes. So a lot of what goes on in your body related to your health, related to your future diseases, is actually being dictated by your partner microbiome. And that itself, we only know right now what 144 molecules that it produces out of likely more than 100,000. Now, we created a different approach to look, and it's expanding researchers access this potential valuable source not only for therapeutics, agrochemicals, sustainability, cosmetics, advanced energy. I can go on and on. It's allowing us to go get at the majority of these molecules. And it was simplicity with technology that we had to overcome and basically use with the simplicity. And the simplicity is scale. I like to ask people a lot, if we were to start a company mining lithium and I said this was our tool, which is 1 cup measuring cup, would it be a good tool for mining lithium? And most everybody in the world would go, no, that's crazy. It's the wrong tool and the wrong scale. Well, we mine the microbes of the world with very small samples. And what my company, Biosortia, is doing is we're going to where they are in quantity and obtaining 200 million times this quantity to get at molecules you can't even see with a small sample size. But with our sample size, you not only see them, you can obtain those molecules, you can test those molecules, you can improve those molecules. Challenge is we're doing something that nobody in the world has ever been taught or created the technologies to do. And in life sciences, disruption is very difficult because everybody's been trained to do what they have spent a career doing, writing papers, building a portfolio of opportunities and respecting their industry. They can't necessarily move to a new technology. So it always takes time for new technologies to come into the life sciences or therapeutics. And we're at that stage where we're trying, but man, could we use some support?
Cool. So let me relate this to, I'm more of a biohacker than most. I come upon it through my wife. My wife is a naturopath herself. So I am familiar with microbiome. And I've had a couple of, I have different courses through my fitness and weight loss journey. I've had a couple of stool sample tests, and they look at the microbiome in the stool sample and they say, okay, well, here's your ratio of microbiome to be able to diagnose things. So that's my experience with microbiology. That's kind of my, come to find out, I have very little bifidum, some pretty major species of bacteria that are missing. So now that's going to lead my naturopath to suggest some probiotics and that kind of thing. So step into where I'm at and help me understand what you're looking into.
Yeah, so the genomics is the code. Can I read the email you last wrote by looking at your hardware language?
No.
No, I can't even read your email by looking at your software that's on top of the hardware language. I have to go to what actually resulted. Same thing is true with genomics. Is we have the code, but every person has a different code. And your microbiome has even a different code. So trying to use the code to tell you what's going on is a little like looking at your machine language and trying to predict your email. That's one of the big challenges we have today because that's the information we can get. And if that's the information we can get, we're going to use the heck out of that for everything. And the problem is, it is not real good predictors unless it's defects in genes. But even then, it's questionable. So we've all heard about the BRCA gene and people that have even been famous who decided that they had that genetic predisposition. They were going to radically change their body in order to make sure they had a less chance of getting a cancer. Well, the problem is that percentage is about 52%. So if you have the BRCA gene, you got a 52% chance. If you don't have the BRCA gene, your percentages go way down. But the reality of it is it's not the best predictor. And some of the work people have done to look at stool samples and genes and do predictions, it's not really panned out well. So what we ultimately propose to do is not only connect the genomics, because we have no problem doing the genomics. We think there is valuable information there. But what it's missing is the software of the user. And how do you get to the software of the user? You look at the molecules that are being created. You fingerprint the molecules. Those molecules are there. They're in your circulating system. They're in there in such small quantities that they're impossible to identify unless you knew what they were. And it's our technology where we will understand what they are, both computationally using AI and tools, as well as direct analysis. And we'll start to uncover those actual molecules and make a fingerprint map of health to ultimately go along with the genomics. Then your prediction level, your reality level goes way up because if we had 20 people on this call right now, we'd have completely different genomics, completely different microbiome, but the molecules that are in operation in the human body are almost completely overlapped. They're in different quantities. So it's important to get to what's actually happening.
Interesting. I'm beginning to understand. And you started to go here. Where are the most significant gaps between your digital, like between those ambitions, like the ambitions that you have around this and the realities today? What is the challenge that you're having there?
Yeah. And there's a book written by Clayton. Well, I mean, he made his career, Clayton Christensen, and Innovators Dilemma. May he rest in peace. He passed away about 2.5 years ago. But a Harvard professor, and he wrote all about how tough it is to get disruption into the entrenched. Pharma companies, biotech companies, the academic world are entrenched. They all know what they're going to do. They know what they're going to ask for. They understand that. And in fact, in about 2002, pharma companies threw up their hands in bulk and said, we can't do research. The research costs went up and up, the yields went down. And that's still going on today. Just because academia does it just means they can wait till academia produces something that's worth buying. And then there's a feeding frenzy on that product and people buy that product. But right now, nobody is really doing core research on new technologies. They're all waiting on existing technologies to deliver de-risked molecules that can be sold into pharma, biotech, and even VCs will only invest. These are VCs that are supposed to be looking for new technologies. They're looking for a molecule that a pharma company would want to buy from them after they put a little money into it. So we're a little bit broken on research. And the same thing is true with even our research organizations, because they have started to say, wow, all this research really isn't working. Let's focus on de-risk assets. Well, along with that, the costs have gone up 86% faster than inflation since the 1970s. And the yield of new molecular entities, new drugs, has actually gone down. So we're spending more and more and more money, and we're looking at the infinite universe of molecules, not what nature made. We need to know what nature made. We don't. We can guess. We can project. We need to figure it out and be sure.
Interesting. I went to Dave Asprey's biohacking conference, and I was lucky enough to see. I was hearing a lot about the MNN, which is supposed to increase your NR in your cell. So this is like the healing component of the cell. And some buddies of mine had gone to go get NRIVs to promote the anti-aging molecule of the cell. This wonderful doctor that presented on this talk really was the NR that you're putting into you through an IV. It doesn't naturally exist in the body. So you put it in your body, the body has no idea what to do with it, and it actually drives up inflammation. And like to get it through the outer membrane of the cell, there's only a couple cells that even take it. The brain and the lungs, I believe, will take it. So it was my first time really like listening to a cellular biologist talk about something that I was interested in and remotely aware of, and then share with me how all the approaches through facts and through study were not working, that they were like basically catching the marketing of these tools, like the reversal helps promote NR, but it wasn't very bioavailable. And so of course there was a sales pitch at the end that they had a supplement that produced NR and promoted all this anti-aging. But what was more significant, that is my first time understanding the difference between studies, between research, that they had done a cross age study, not just, hey, here's older males that are probably NR deficient. So a lot of these studies are tailored to get the best results. And they had went out of their way for their supplement to produce a broader study result, that their supplement actually did help the cell produce NR. But it's just really cool to be exposed to the research in a direct way, and then realize how much of that research was available that I could read about and see if I wanted to take a supplement or try something. And as the kind of a recent thing, just seeing that research is available and that there's a lot of tricks people play.
Yeah, no, and it's true. And luckily, because of the information age, we have instant access to almost anything we want. We can use AI, we can use Google Scholar, and you can look up studies and you can read them. The only thing I would caution is that even with the studies, look at repeatability of scientific papers, and they're not that repeatable. I think it was like 86% were not repeatable. But what I would caution is that doesn't mean scientific studies in general are wrong or flawed. It means that maybe not all the information got in there to be repeatable. And maybe there is some erroneous information that exists in some of these. But that's all we have right now is peer-reviewed science and the experience that people have. sometimes the experience dictates belief, and it may even be reproducible, but there's no incentive for science to actually go prove it or research it because there's no grant for it and there's no follow on funding for it once you prove it. Why go prove something that doesn't need proving and has no opportunity to improve somebody's career? That's one of the biggest challenges we have is we'll have lots of things out there in the real world that have no scientific information on it, but they actually might be working.
Interesting. Nobody's just broke it down with the scientific method. It's just existing in people's experience. It's super, there's something to get there.
And the pharma world is really relying on that based on indigenous people's experiences with natural plants and the activity you get. So obviously there was no scientific method ever done by, let's say, people in the outback of Australia who realized a plant could do X, but now they know it, and pharma generally or other researchers are trying to tap into that and see is there opportunities for making a commercially viable drug.
Yeah. When the nootropics came out, I remember Siltip was a brand of a artichoke heart supplement. And I experienced that it made me focus a little better. It extended my mental fatigue, seemed to be 2, 3 hours later. My tolerance built up pretty quick, and I went back to being kind of slow minded at 6 p.m. But for a while, I felt like I really got a good kick. No real research, but
Yeah. And I'll give you something to think about because it is in the literature currently, even though one of the authors or participant in some of these studies has been retired from the NIH for years, Dr. David Newman, who's got, I think it's like 62,000 citations to his scientific papers. He will point out that most metabolites or those drug-like molecules in plants likely came from microbes. That's what science is finding out. So microbes were the first organisms on the planet. They evolved into everything. They still live with us in every plant, in every habitat. So the reality of it is a lot of the chemistry is coming from the microbes that live right alongside of the plants themselves.
Mm.
But that's harder to figure out than going and harvesting a plant and going, oh, it's the plant's molecule.
Well, and then any kind of processing would kill the microbes, and then you'd lose the benefit.
Well, you would have, you would have the molecule through the processing, just like when they process cannabis, you end up with molecules. You can process to end up with molecules unless they're highly unstable. And if they're highly unstable, they're not useful anyway. Well, not useful as a drug.
Right. So I'm going to ask you some questions. These are going to be more abstract and kind of tap on how you run business, how you run your company. And so the first one in this vein is, how do you approach risk when implementing a cutting edge technology?
I think that I've had a lot of experience in doing that. One thing we wanted to create for a market, we were so confident that creating it was going to result in sales and growth that we went ahead and started 3 projects simultaneously with 3 separate teams. We knew what we wanted. We had team A internally focus on this application for getting there, team B internally focus on this, and team C externally. We invested a little bit of money to get to that first round cutoff, and we killed the outside one quickly because they made very little progress for the dollars we spent. And then we gave the 2 teams internally about another 30 days. And then we picked one, and the other team that was working on the B project ended up going to work on the A project. And they brought different perspectives and different ideas. So it depends upon the value of the technology. If you have confidence that this can be a winner, then you have got to treat it as a winner and you have got to engineer success. And that engineering of success can come in a lot of different ways. I just gave one example of engineering success.
Right. Yeah. I would, in the late 90s dot-com bubble time, I was on one team. There were two teams pitted together to build an e-commerce platform. I was on the team that won, but that is especially good in new industries where the methodology is not proven, where you say, okay, you three go figure out a methodology that will work, and you have a limited amount of time to do that. Sabre Labs, the parent company of American Airlines. Sabre was also well known for this software team called Sabre Labs, and they had kind of small, medium, large experiments. So they had 10-day experiments, 100-day experiments, 1,000-day experiments. And you had to go through the ranks. Okay, 10 days to try something out, and then they would test it. And then, okay, well, that kind of worked. Then they would do 100 days worth of work, try it out. And they would do very few of the 1,000-day experiments because that's 3 years of work. And so they would range their development exercises into like those ranges. Like, what could I prove in 10 days? What could I prove in a little over 90? And then what do I really want to build out? That's really cool. What advice can you share or approach to connecting technology roadmaps with your overall business strategy? I ask this because I love to see how brilliant minds and business leaders kind of do their planning, and how they connect like what they want to do with their technology roadmap with their business strategy.
Yeah. So I would say the technology roadmap needs to be defined in absence of a business roadmap, because it's much easier to modify toward a business roadmap than it is toward a technological roadmap. So you need to know exactly how you're going to achieve, when you're going to achieve it, what it's going to cost. You're going to have to really move toward a new technology with incredible focus. Then, when that's really well tuned, then you certainly look at where and how it fits into the business model. But I think what people do so often is they don't modify their business model for a new technological opportunity, and they blow it. They totally blow it because the technology drives the business model if you look carefully. If you can't drive a business model with your resulting technology, it's not a business. You need to be able to figure that out. You need to be able to figure that out quick.
That that is really interesting. I think most people see it differently. They go, "I want to do a business," and it's interesting because you're in the science world where you want to have an invention first. You want to have this technology first, and then you come figure out what business model suits the best.
Yeah, well, I will pause you there.
Sure.
You want to envision the pathway to the technology. That does not mean you spend a penny except for planning to figure out if it's possible. Once you've done that planning to figure out if it's possible, then you integrate the business model, but you do so with what would be described as brainstorming rather than curve fitting.
Got it.
You need to know, for instance, IBM obviously didn't get the value of MS-DOS originally. They wouldn't even buy it for $100,000. The reality of it is it's like, no, they didn't understand the technology and the opportunity. They were hardware. That was their business model. It didn't fit. You can go to Sony with Beta versus VHS. Sony went without a business model, no offense to them, completely without a business model, completed their technology and said, we got the best tape recorder in the world. And they did, but they didn't move it into their business model soon enough to realize VHS, with a less capable technology, used a business model to get it in everybody's hands. So they got out competed. They're both critically important at the right time of evaluation.
That's interesting. So a lot of folks would do like, if I build it, they do a lot of market research to make sure nobody else has already built it. That kind of coincides with what you're saying. Do your research on the technology, make sure that there's a there there. and make sure that you can produce the creative idea and then integrate it to your business model. So you want to make sure that there's a there is how I interpreted what you just said.
Yeah, exactly. But you also have to be careful about eliminating a business model because you're a late addition. And I'll use the example of Apple. Apple has hardly invented a thing. There were always working models on the market of virtually everything that they've come along and improved.
Mm,
But they improved it as part of their strategy because they're a high end product. So they can look at what's out there and they go, we can make it better, we can make it better, we can make it better. And they typically did. So their prowess was not invention, their prowess was execution of a better same thing.
yeah, that's really cool. What lessons have you learned from initiatives that failed to deliver expected value? What's a lessons learned from failure that you could share?
Yeah, I've seen failure. We jumped on during the pandemic a way to make a mask that could protect against the particulate and be completely 100% biodegradable and thrown away. So we were making a very cheap mask. We filed patents. We spent way too much money in way too short of period of time. We did have an order from a major car company, but when people start to do the real analysis into the mask and you're trying to stop virus particles, I'm sorry, that's very difficult to do and still breathe. So, you put a plastic bag around your head, you'll stop virus particles.
Right. But
It won't work that long.
Yeah.
So the project had a component which was defined to have a certain particulate level size reduction that was not ever able to be met.
Mm.
It would have been nice to figure that out sooner.
Right.
And that would be a lesson is okay, look at your roadmap and identify deal killers along that roadmap and then verify they're not deal killers.
Right. In the software world, we do some prototyping up front to kind of get that first, like the hardest piece, like what is the most challenging piece. We worked on a music tutoring application, which was accelerated by COVID because people weren't meeting in person, but they still wanted to have music lessons. We wanted high quality video, high quality sound. Most video conferencing solutions, if you play an extended note, the noise reduction kicks in and cuts out the note. So we wanted to prove that we could do high quality sound over a browser application. We just wanted it to exist in the browser. And so until we proved that, there was really no reason to build forward. And I've heard that from other guests in the manufacturing space that you need to find that one thing that has to be true in order for the product to be successful, kind of find a way to prove that out.
Yeah.
And same thing there with the can you actually stop virus and breathe? Do you find the same, not to be too controversial, but do you find the same to be true with just the regular N95 mask?
Yeah, I think you could see variations of performance by different materials. There's no doubt about that. And I think the challenge was to get away from synthetic materials with natural materials.
Mm-hmm. Within your organization, how do you cultivate a culture of innovation and technical fluency?
Yeah, I think that's first and foremost driven by customers. So if you have the right customer satisfaction drilled throughout your organization, then you start to recognize meeting their needs is not just today, but it's anticipating their needs for tomorrow and leveraging their knowledge to understand what that anticipation is. So we did some things. One of the major computer companies Actually, there were two stories like this, but they called us up and said, in both cases, we have a meeting tomorrow. We're looking for a solution. Sorry to call you at such a last minute, but can you see if you can propose something? And we said, great. Let's make sure we have your FedEx. We'll have something on your desk tomorrow morning. And one of them was a package that we were competing with a firm that got hired. And they spent over $100,000 of design time creating a package for the market. And we got invited the day before to participate. We won. In one day, we looked at what they had said, met their need, got it to them, and we won the award, which was about $1.4 million over the next year.
Right.
The next one that I was talking about was a major software company, and they had a specific problem, and we solved that. And ultimately, we created the solution in about 4 hours, shipped it to them. They had it in hand for their meeting, and then they used that product for the next 10 years. We couldn't have invented those things for anything, but the customers handed them to us
Right.
because we listened and because we had a culture of let's solve customer problems.
Right.
Because customer problems is a direct path to revenue.
Yeah, and customers are the one constant, right? Everybody has customers that they can listen to. Even if you're building something for efficiency inside your org, then your own internal users can be your users.
Yeah. And so for my objective today, knowing I'm in the therapeutics world or agrochemical world, my customer need is to understand what molecules or therapeutics or agrochemicals they need and get those into their early pipeline. That's my whole job right now.
Interesting. Share an experience you could give peers just beginning their journey. What's some advice? Nobody really likes advice. They like shared experiences. But what's something you would say to folks just starting out their early journey as an inventor, as a scientist, as an engineer?
Yeah, so I would give people different thoughts for different specifics. But if you're talking an entrepreneur, I would say if you are a first-time entrepreneur, count on working 100 plus hours per week for a long time. And if you do not have that in your makeup, forget it. Go work for somebody else.
Right.
Because you're going to have, if you've got the vision, you've got the direction, you've got the drive, you better show it to everyone. You better live it, breathe it, eat it. Sorry, family. I'm going to have as much time as I can possibly have. And guess what? We're going to eat dinner. Let's eat at my desk, please. I don't know. But the reality of it is commitment is key if you're going to be an entrepreneur. And I think many people have found that out. Sometimes people hit lightning strikes. Sometimes lightning strikes are just such a big win. It's brilliant, but those are rare. Lightning strikes don't happen. Those are really, really rare. If you're talking about an engineer or a scientist, I would say that there's pathways that are well known. I think you first and foremost better make sure you're cut out for it. So can you do any personality testing? Can you see if this is the right job for you? Whether it's a Myers-Briggs or some other kind of personality testing, do something so you know if you're wired to do this day in and day out for years.
Yeah.
Because if you're going to be a scientist or researcher, you better be very good at what you do, or you're going to be on the cut, find a job, cut, find a job cycle that occurs with most businesses. You want to be the person they want to retain. You want to be the person that they want to count on. You want to be the person that's writing up the projects and getting them done, executing them. And that takes commitment too.
Yeah. Commitment's a good call out, but you're also saying not only as an entrepreneur, not only validating your idea, but validating yourself.
Yeah.
That's a great perspective. You mentioned earlier that you need some support, or what you're working on needs some support. I wanted to give you an opportunity as we wrap up here. How could folks support you?
Yeah, we've done a good job, and I really appreciate the opportunity to tell this story. We're reaching people, but in our entire history of creating this technology, industrial scale microbiome mining, there's probably fewer than 100,000 people in the world that's even heard of it, and fewer than 500 that have ever taken the time to understand how powerful it's going to be. So we know we need to hit influencers, thought leaders, people that end up going, wow, you mean there's a new technology that could really impact humanity and we're doing nothing with it? I need those people to hear this story. This opportunity is fantastic, and I thank you very much. And hopefully, some of the people that are listening will say, you know what? I know someone I should introduce to Ross. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm accessible. Just write your note carefully because I don't connect with 9 out of 10. And the reason I don't connect with 9 out of 10 is I don't need the services they're offering.
Sure. Yeah, makes sense. Other than LinkedIn, is there anywhere else that if people liked what you had to say and want to learn more, is there any other way they should connect with you?
Yeah, Biosortia itself, biosortia.com, Biosortia, is a great reference source for us, and you can contact us right there. Now we're upgrading the website. We hope to show a little bit more. It doesn't show a lot, but I think the articles, the blogs, the videos help a lot. And I've done things like ideation series for the federal government where we laid this out and show how it could impact what would be 80 future products. And ultimately, I think in that entire series so far, we've had less than 150 people start looking at it. So even in the federal government, you get invited to do a presentation that's supposed to go to all the alphabet agencies, and we've touched virtually none of them.
Right.
That's the challenge.
Yeah. Well, it's been great having you today.
Fantastic. Thank you again for this opportunity, and keep up the good work.
Thank you.